This is a true homicide case. What follows contains real accounts of violence, loss, and betrayal. Some details may be disturbing, so please proceed with care and discretion.
Evil man was put to jail for evil crimes done to my sister, and he will pay for the rest of his life. The justice system prevail, and the dear Lord will take care of him after. Saying that nobody can do this to anybody, and that if you need help, get help.
Welcome back, and thank you to everyone who continues to support these difficult but important stories. If you're new here, we're glad you've joined us. Together, we remember victims, expose hidden truths, and reflect on lessons that must not be ignored. In 2009, the city of Ottawa was shaken by what would later be described in Canadian media as one of the most shocking domestic homicide cases in the nation's capital. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime, it was how long it had gone on, hidden in plain sight in the middle of an ordinary neighborhood. This wasn't a stranger in the shadows. It was someone she trusted most with her life, who turned a home into a prison and love into something unrecognizable. December 6, 2009. Ottawa police descended into the basement of a modest home on Barwell Avenue. The smell hit them first, so heavy and foul that officers instinctively covered their faces. Stains streaked the floor. A door hung broken from its frame, and in the corner lay a makeshift bed of couch cushions. On it was the body of a young woman so battered that forensic experts couldn't even lift her fingerprints. Even seasoned investigators, men and women who had seen the worst of humanity, struggled to comprehend the horror they were looking at. Before we continue, please take a moment to subscribe, drop a like, and let us know where you're watching from. It helps keep these stories alive and this community growing. Thank you. What the investigators discovered was only the beginning. What they uncovered next would reveal a chilling nightmare stretching far beyond one violent night. It was a vicious campaign of cruelty, carried out step by step, day after day. And the most chilling truth of all? She lived through much of it. Her name was Donna Jones. She wasn't just a statistic in Canada's fight against domestic violence. She was a vibrant, ambitious woman with a future worth protecting. Born on Christmas Day, 1975, she was the joy of her family, a daughter who brought laughter into every celebration, the first in her family to attend university. Donna earned her degree at Carleton with determination and discipline. At the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, she quickly became known for her intelligence, her leadership, and her warmth. Friends and colleagues alike remembered her as the one who could brighten even the most difficult day, always organizing gatherings and making people feel included. By her late 20s, Donna had built what many only dream of, a home of her own, a stable career, and a reputation for kindness and strength. She was outgoing, generous, and driven, with dreams that stretched far beyond what she had already achieved. But those dreams and that light were stolen. What police found in that basement forced the city to confront a truth so unsettling that it would haunt everyone who came near the case. She was more than the body investigators found in that basement. Donna Jones had built a life of independence and promise. Born on Christmas Day in 1975, Donna was the kind of daughter every family leaned on. Friends recalled her warmth, her laughter, and the way she filled rooms with light. At home, she was taught loyalty and accommodation, values that made her deeply caring, but also vulnerable to exploitation by those who twisted trust into control. As a child, Donna carried insecurities. She had endured teasing for a lazy eye, struggled with her weight, and often felt self-conscious. But those early doubts drove her to prove herself in ways that would later inspire those around her. She studied hard, climbed steadily, and became the first in her family to attend university. That achievement, at Carleton, was a turning point, proof of resilience and determination. By her early 30s, Donna had crafted stability many only dream of. She owned her own home, managed her finances with discipline, and even paid off her student loans early. At the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, colleagues knew her as sharp, ambitious, and reliable. Court records later revealed she was seen as a leader in her workplace, the person who remembered birthdays, organized office gatherings, and quietly took care of details others overlooked. To her friends, she was simply sunshine. Always quick with a smile, always the one who made others feel included. They described her as generous, the kind of person who didn't just show up for you, but lifted you when you were down. Donna's future stretched wide before her. She was financially independent, respected at work, and surrounded by a circle of people who loved her. She was outgoing, generous, and determined, qualities that made her magnetic in any room. By her late 20s, she had the building blocks for a life full of potential, a stable career, a strong reputation, and dreams still waiting to be fulfilled. But predators often target strength wrapped in kindness. The very traits that made Donna admired, her loyalty, her ability to forgive, her willingness to see the best in people, would be turned against her. Behind the image of stability, someone had already begun exploiting those vulnerabilities. She was 33 years old, standing on the cusp of the future she had earned, and yet her life was about to be violently cut short. The question now is, who was the man she trusted, and how did his presence in her life turn her world from light into darkness? The man Donna trusted the most was Mark Peter Hutt. He was 32 when their paths first crossed. At the time, Mark was working occasional roofing jobs and odd construction work around Ottawa. On the surface, he looked like the kind of man who could walk into a room and win it over. He laughed easily, told stories with energy, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who craved attention. For someone like Donna, serious, accomplished, and often described as grounded, Mark's spontaneity felt exciting, almost intoxicating. The two met through friends in the mid-2000s. At first, their connection seemed effortless. He complimented her constantly, poured attention onto her, and gave her the kind of affection that made her feel seen. For a woman who had spent much of her youth self-conscious about a lazy eye and weight struggles, Mark's focus seemed like validation she had been waiting for. In those early days, life with him looked like adventure. He whisked her away on drives, exaggerated stories to make her laugh, and painted a picture of a future filled with love and family. Donna's friends would later say she was captivated, so much so that when small red flags appeared, she brushed them aside, convinced that love could cover the cracks. But Mark's warmth was a mask. Behind it was instability, manipulation, and a streak of selfishness that would only grow darker with time. Court filings revealed that by 2006, before he and Donna even married, he had already declared bankruptcy. Debt, unpaid bills, and reckless spending weren't just mistakes. They were patterns, signs of a man unwilling to take responsibility, happy to let others shoulder the burden. Donna, loyal and compassionate, thought she could help him rebuild. But predators don't rebuild, they consume. And Mark consumed everything. His charm twisted into obsession and control. Investigators later uncovered stacks of handwritten notes scattered through the couple's home, hundreds of them. At first glance, they read like love letters, but in between declarations of devotion were sharp turns into rage, threats, and manipulation. They painted a picture of a man whose so-called love was little more than possession, swinging violently between desperation and fury. At Donna's workplace, colleagues noticed the phone ringing endlessly. It was Mark, checking, demanding, interrogating. At home, he managed the money, cutting into her independence, draining her security. making sure every financial decision tethered her closer to him. Friends saw her isolation deepen. Invitations went unanswered. Outings grew rare. Donna, once the organizer of gatherings, had slipped into silence. By 2007, those same friends were terrified enough to stage an intervention. They pleaded with her not to marry him, warning that she was stepping into danger. Even her bridesmaids, supposed to be her closest supporters, pulled out of the wedding, unwilling to stand behind vows they knew would destroy her. But on September 15th, 2007, Donna still walked down the aisle. She believed in his promises, even as he sharpened the bars of her cage. The change was visible almost immediately. According to prosecutors, within 2 years, Donna's weight plummeted from 162 pounds to just 101. What looked like illness to casual acquaintances was something far more sinister: stress, fear, and coercion written onto her body. Friends said her eyes lost their spark. Her laughter, once constant, had nearly vanished. By 2009, the woman who once built her life on independence was unrecognizable. Mark's reckless spending had gutted her finances. Trucks, ATVs, snowmobiles, his toys, his pleasures, paid for at the expense of her future. That year, Donna filed for bankruptcy. The financial freedom she had worked so hard to earn now completely dismantled. But then came a chilling warning. A complaint was made to the police, a desperate cry for help. But the chance to save her life slipped through the cracks. The system failed, and Donna was left trapped with the man who had been tightening his grip from the very beginning. In the weeks leading up to December 2009, the warning signs were no longer subtle. They were written on Donna's body. Coworkers began to notice injuries that didn't make sense. Burns that peeked out from beneath her clothing. Dark bruises she tried to conceal with makeup. Blackened fingernails, swollen knuckles, and more than once, a black eye she explained away with excuses. According to investigators, Donna became skilled at deflection, claiming she had slipped, that she had bumped into something, that she was clumsy. But the pattern was clear to those who saw her daily. Something was very wrong. The breaking point came in late November. Court records show that on or around November 24th, 2009, Mark attacked Donna in one of the most sadistic acts prosecutors would later outline. He scalded her with boiling water laced with vinegar, dousing her across the torso and limbs. The burns covered an estimated 40% of her body. It was torture disguised as domestic life. What makes this moment even more horrifying is what followed. Donna did not receive the emergency care she desperately needed. According to testimony, she remained at home, untreated, while the burns grew infected. Friends were frantic. They saw the agony etched into her movements, her skin visibly damaged, her pain impossible to mask, so they acted. Just one day after the boiling water attack, Donna's friends filed what's called a third-party complaint with police. It was the third report of concern that had been raised about her relationship with Mark. But tragically, court documents revealed that this complaint was not investigated until after her death. Another window of opportunity, when her life might have been saved, was left to close without action. Donna herself tried to keep the facade alive. Even as infection set in, she phoned her mother and reassured her she was fine. Trauma experts would later explain this behavior as a form of survival, trauma bonding. Victims often minimize the danger they're in, clinging to hope that the abuser's cruelty won't be permanent, that it won't end the way it always threatens to. But it did. And in those final weeks of 2009, Donna Jones was trapped in a house where love had become a weapon. and where every missed intervention sealed her fate more tightly. The silence after that missed warning was broken only on the morning of December 6, 2009. That was the day Mark Peter Hutt finally dialed 911. The words he spoke to dispatch were calm, almost detached. "My wife's not breathing." To first responders, it sounded like a medical emergency, the kind of call that happens every day in a city. But when paramedics arrived at the modest Barwell Avenue home, what they encountered was nothing short of horrifying. Donna's body lay in the basement, placed on a crude bed of couch cushions. Her skin was swollen, her clothing fused to the burns beneath. The air was thick with the acrid stench of infection and decay, a smell that lingered on the responders' uniforms long after they left the scene. Court records later revealed that forensic specialists could immediately tell something didn't match Mark's account. He insisted she had collapsed only minutes before he called, but investigators determined otherwise. Her body showed signs that she had been dead for at least 12 hours before that phone rang. The timeline didn't just raise questions, it dismantled his story entirely. The basement itself told its own story. Stains marked the floor and walls. A door leaned broken from its hinges, evidence of violence and struggle. The air carried the unmistakable weight of neglect. Weeks of torment that no neighbor had seen, hidden behind the quiet exterior of a suburban street. For the paramedics and officers on scene, it was clear this was not a sudden tragedy. This was cruelty stretched over days, culminating in a death that had been delayed, concealed, and only reluctantly reported. If cases like this matter to you, please subscribe, because the basement was just the first scene. What investigators found in the days that followed would reveal the darkest and most disturbing truths of all. The truth of what Donna endured came to light under the cold fluorescent lamps of the morgue. Dr. Christopher Milroy, the forensic pathologist, was faced with a body that told a story no one could ignore. Beneath the burns that covered nearly half her body were dozens of hidden injuries, each one a silent record of violence. Embedded in her skin were 29 tiny metal pellets, air rifle rounds fired into her body like she was nothing more than a target. Some had been there for days, slowly festering. Others were fresh, lodged beneath burned flesh. Milroy testified that this detail alone proved the horror. The burns had come first, the pellets after. Donna had survived long enough to be tortured again. Her ribs carried the same story. 9 fractures in total, some healed, some fresh. These were not the marks of a single outburst. They were the evidence of ongoing, systematic abuse. A nose broken, finger snapped. A wrist fractured in what experts called a nightstick break, the kind of injury seen when someone raises their arms to shield themselves from blows. 2 black eyes stared blankly, even in death, surrounded by cuts and scrapes that spoke of endless assaults. But the official cause of death carried its own damning weight. Donna Jones died of septic shock, her body overwhelmed by infection. According to Dr. Milroy, her burns had been survivable. In fact, Dr. Joel Fish, the director of a leading burn unit, later testified that with prompt medical care, Donna's survival chances were virtually 100%. She didn't die because of the injuries alone. She died because Mark Peter Hutt made sure she never got the help that would have saved her. Investigators said the evidence removed any shadow of doubt. This was not an accident, not neglect, but calculated cruelty. Hidden inside the couple's home, police found the tools of intimidation: handcuffs, a bow and arrow, multiple air rifles, objects not kept for sport or necessity, but as weapons to terrorize and control. Court filings later described a pattern of dominance where violence was paired with psychological warfare, Hutt using these items to keep Donna silent, compliant, and afraid. The autopsy transformed the case. What looked at first like a domestic tragedy was exposed as sadism stretched out over time. Each pellet, each fracture, each untreated burn testified to choices, a man choosing, again and again, to inflict suffering, and then to deny the woman he called his wife the simple dignity of care. For prosecutors, the evidence built a chilling narrative. Donna hadn't just been hurt. She had been systematically broken down. And in the end, it wasn't her injuries that made survival impossible. It was Mark's decision to let infection do the rest. The science was clear. The timeline was undeniable. The brutality was deliberate. The autopsy told investigators how Donna died. The trial would expose why, and it was far more sinister and diabolical than anyone first imagined. In February 2013, inside an Ottawa courtroom, Mark Peter Hutt tried to control the narrative one last time. He stood before the court and offered to plead guilty, but not to murder. He wanted it reduced to criminal negligence causing death, a charge that would have carried far less time behind bars. Prosecutors rejected it outright. They argued this was no accident, no lapse of judgment. It was cold, calculated, first-degree murder. The Crown reminded jurors that Hutt's lies began the very moment police first questioned him. Inside the interrogation room, he sat across from detectives and calmly claimed Donna's injuries were the result of a kitchen mishap. She spilled boiling soup on herself, he said. But detectives had already seen her body. The burns weren't random splashes. They were deep, patterned, and deliberate. When pressed, Hutt changed his story. Now he insisted she had fallen against a wood stove. Detectives leaned in, pointing out the obvious. There were no stove burns on her clothes, no evidence in the home to support that claim. Cornered again, Hutt invented a third version. An explosion, he said, while he was making soup in a pressure cooker. He painted it as a freak accident. Investigators later testified that not a single trace of such an explosion existed in the kitchen. No scorched walls, no damaged appliance. Then came Dr. Joel Fish, director of the burn unit. His testimony left the courtroom silent. Donna, he said, had a virtually 100% chance of survival if she had been treated. Instead, she was locked in a basement, untreated, her condition spiraling into septic shock. It wasn't only the injuries that killed her. It was the cold, deliberate denial of help. The defense had nothing left. Even they called Hutt a monster, but they clung to the argument that the fractures and pellets were not directly fatal, that her death was negligence, not murder. The jury saw through it. On June 7, 2013, they returned their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence was mandatory, life in prison, with no chance of parole for 25 years. Justice was delivered. Yet, the haunting truth remained. Long before a jury weighed the evidence, there had been moments, calls, warnings, cries for help, where Donna's life might still have been saved. The verdict may have sealed Mark Hutt's fate, but it also forced investigators and the public to confront another uncomfortable truth. His lies had been given space to breathe for far too long. From the very beginning, Hutt spun a web of shifting stories. First, he told officers Donna had fallen into a fire pit. Then he pivoted, claiming she had scalded herself with a pot of boiling water. Each version sounded barely plausible on the surface, but forensic evidence tore them apart. Her burns didn't match a fall, nor did they align with a kitchen accident. And the pellet wounds? They had no place in either story. Court records show that every false narrative collapsed under the weight of hard science. But one of the darkest revelations wasn't about what Hutt said. It was about what the system failed to do. Just days before Donna's death, a third-party complaint had been filed. Friends desperate to get her help. That report should have triggered immediate intervention. Instead, investigators later admitted it was never followed up. It surfaced only after she was gone, buried in a backlog. Prosecutors called it a missed chance. Advocates called it something stronger, a collapse in process. Because this wasn't just about one form misplaced or one call overlooked. It was about a system that allowed a woman in visible danger to slip through the cracks. In the aftermath, advocacy groups pointed to Donna's case as proof of why third-party complaints must be taken seriously. Too often, they argued, victims are unable or too terrified to speak for themselves. It is the friends, co-workers, and family who carry the warning signs to authorities. And when those warnings are dismissed, the cost is measured in lives lost. Donna's voice had been silenced, but the silence of the system that failed to respond, that would echo long after the courtroom doors closed. And yet, her story was not over. What came next transformed Donna's name from a case file into a rallying cry. While the sentence was final, but the ripple of grief was only beginning. At the sentencing hearing, the courtroom shifted from the cold facts of evidence to the raw weight of loss. Donna's family and friends spoke, their words carrying the pain that no verdict could erase. Her brother Derek stood and declared that Hutt would pay for the rest of his life, a vow that echoed through the room like a promise, not just of justice, but of remembrance. Her mother, Irina, described what could never be restored, the laughter of a daughter who once lit up every gathering, the future milestones that would never come. "There's a hole in our lives that will never close," she said, her voice breaking under the weight of permanent absence. Friends spoke too, carrying a different burden, guilt. One admitted they had introduced Donna to Mark, a decision that haunted them after watching his charm twist into cruelty. Others remembered trying to intervene, staging warnings, pulling out of her wedding. The lingering question of whether they could have done more was a shadow they would carry. For Ottawa, the case became more than a trial. It became a chilling marker. Reporters called it one of the city's darkest crimes, a reminder that what looks like a picture-perfect couple from the outside can conceal a prison of abuse within. The shockwaves of Donna's death did not fade quickly. They lingered in conversations about domestic violence, in calls for vigilance, and in the community's memory of a woman who deserved so much more. Because Donna Jones should have been remembered for her life, not for the cruelty that ended it. Donna's story did not disappear with the verdict. Her case has since been cited in awareness campaigns, trainings, and conversations about domestic violence across Canada. Advocates point to her experience as a stark reminder. Abuse is not confined to any class, education level, or background. It can happen behind closed doors, in homes that look stable, to women who appear strong. Donna's life and death became a warning signal of how manipulation hides in plain sight, of how systems must respond when friends raise alarms, and of how silence allows cruelty to thrive. If this story moved you in any way, let it be more than just a story. Let it be a call to action. Share it to honor Donna Ellen Jones's memory, and to shine a light on the silent epidemic of domestic violence all over the world. Every subscriber, every share is more than a number. It is a voice joining the fight to ensure victims like Donna are never erased from memory and will forever remain in our hearts. And if you or someone you love is living through what Donna endured, let her story be a reminder. You are not alone, and there is strength in reaching out for help. Thank you for standing with us, and thank you for keeping Donna's Ellen Jones name alive forever.